Hello everyone, welcome to the part 3 of our webinar. So today we're talking about Supercharger portals. So what does that mean? That means last series we talked about capabilities and what kind of capabilities do people want or organizations want in their intranet. And here today we're talking about extending those capabilities. So Microsoft in their Office 365 suite has provided a wide range of capabilities that is suitable to make a modern intranet, which we call a digital workplace solution now, more than just a website. However, a lot of organizations still want something more, something that is not out of the box. How do we accomplish that? Well, there are a few ways you can do that. The traditional way is you either pay for it. So you would buy an intranet solution from a vendor. The disadvantages of that is fairly obvious. A lot of people already experienced this, is that whether or not it's most cost effective upfront, you run into this problem of you don't own the intellectual property. So you're reliant on the vendor to provide services and support. So this kind of gets you into this, what we call this golden handcuff situation, where you have a reliance on them. You don't have the code, and any upgrades or support is solely reliant on the third-party vendor. If you're they perform unsatisfactory, then your options are leave the vendor, which means you need to basically redo your whole intranet because you cannot use any of their components anymore, or you have to put up with it. And when you want to transition out of these support contracts, it's usually a lot more difficult than getting into them. Usually onboarding is very easy, offboarding is a little bit more difficult. So I've run into situations where clients have a lot of problems with that. The other option is to develop the solution yourself, and that's the traditional software design and development solution. The problem with that solution is it's the hardest, I'm going to say, from every aspect, from the planning to the design to the skill set to the developers. You need to have the whole team, and everybody needs to be able to work together to bring you a successful custom development project. Now, people do that maybe 10 years ago, but that is basically not really necessary today, especially with mature products such as digital workplace solutions and intranets. So now we're getting on to our last option, is to not build everything from scratch, but and not reinvent the wheel, but take some third-party solutions, open source solutions, and utilizing other workload that's outside of Office 365. For example, you can leverage all the Azure workloads, for example, for reporting, analytics, AI, translation, etc. Together with open source, they will be able to extend the functionalities of Office 365 and your intranet. The advantage of that is it's much cheaper than developing everything from scratch, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. The other advantage is that you own all the source codes. So these products are not developed on some very customized programming language or very secretive that nobody understands what it is. The code is out there in the open. There are millions of professionals, millions of companies probably that can support these products. So if you're unhappy with a service provider, even if you got a partner to implement some of these solutions for you, you can easily switch to somebody else. You own all the intellectual properties, you own all the code, and you can hire any other expert to be able to support your product. So then why do people contribute to open source? You're probably thinking, like, why do people spend all this effort to put their work on the internet for free? Well, there are a couple of reasons. For personal reasons, there's the learning reason. So most people, when new technology come out, people have to learn it. So they play around with it. And when they make something cool, they share it with everybody. Some people are trying to pay back the community. So they felt like they've learned a lot from this community, so they want to contribute as well. A lot of these open sources is not developed by one person, but by a group. So by joining that group, you kind of have a community. The other one is building a portfolio for your own personal reasons. So if you have all these portfolios, you can showcase them in your interviews or in your sales. And then there are corporate reasons, right? So most of these large corporations have a vested interest in people adopting the technology. So they put out some open source product to showcase capabilities and make clients' life easier and their partners' life easier. It also drives adoption of the products. So if they see something that is requested by a lot of people, then they might either add it as a part of the features or just release a open source product where the partners can help you customize and install. And lastly, it's to assist the partners and give recognition to people who contribute in open source in the community. So Microsoft does offer this MVP designation to people who participate in the community, and open source, contributing to open source is a good way to earn that designation. So what does it take to do these implementations? Really not that much. So as you can see later in the presentation, the way to install this open source solution is laid out, and a lot of them have a one-click install script. So you can deploy these into your organization without a lot of skill set. Now, the part where you need some skills is if you want to customize these open source applications. Not every company wants to use them as it is out of the box. Some people want to change the branding, change the color. To make any code changes, you do need programming expertise, but the amount of hours it takes to modify, to make some minor modifications to these applications compared to developing and architecting them from scratch is not even comparable. Maybe a small fraction, maybe 5 to 10% of the total cost. So if you need such a skill set, that's what Microsoft partners are for, such as us. So we have the skill sets to quickly implement some small changes and deploy these applications for you. It's at a significantly reduced cost. You're looking at maybe 5 to 10% of the development budget. And it helps with the iterative approach of requirements. So everybody's into the agile methodology, especially for user interfaces, because it's very hard to write down the requirements of an app or a website when nobody's seen it and people don't really realize what they want. So a very good first step is to be able to deploy some of these open source applications straight as it is, let people play with it, then they can come up with their desired modifications, right? And again, there's many experts in the field. If you don't like one organization or one individual, there are plenty more out there. What about maintenance? So maintenance and upgrade usually needs to be handled by IT. So the maintenance of the platforms are going to be handled by Microsoft, but with open source, just like custom development, it's going to be owned by the IT, but it is owned by your organization. So you own all the data and all the code. Again, that avoids that golden handcuff situation where you're reliant on a third party to maintain your entire infrastructure. What are the best practices when it comes to open source? Well, the first best practice is kind of related to security. Don't just install everything you find on the internet. Go to reputable sources such as GitHub, SourceForge, those reputable open source sites, and look at who implemented it. If it is a known Microsoft MVP or someone that's well known in the community, you can be sure that this application is likely safer to use, right? Chances are you would like an approval or a vetting process. You don't want like everybody in your company to go and install every third-party app that they find on the internet. That's not great governance, and it's probably not secure either. If you plan to use a lot of these apps, you would need architectural oversight. Even if one of these apps works perfectly fine, has no problem by itself, putting many of them together, especially on the same page or the same portal, could cause issues, or it could have performance issues just simply because there's too much code running. So how to optimize your whole intranet experience if you use a lot of open source would need to be architected, and you would need to consult a experienced professional. And lastly is whether or not you want to do it. It is going to be based on obviously your company needs. Outside of open source, there are other options. You could use the low code options such as Power Apps and Power Automate, like we shown in the first webinar. So that would have less code. Some of these open source has a little bit more code. That would depend on the capabilities you're looking for, because not everything can be achieved with low code development methodologies, and the capabilities of your company to support such implementations. Lastly, we already touched something on security. Number one thing about security of these apps is that you don't want everybody to install everything on the internet. One of these days, you're going to install something that's unsecure. So chances are, but when it comes to security and your worries, we're not in the early stages of open source. Open source has been out for a while. So they're fairly safe now. And they're even probably, I would say, safer than custom solutions you hire some company to develop for you. Why? Well, because the code is reviewed by like everybody. There are thousands of people on the internet and on GitHub and SourceForge and all those open source platforms. The code is readily available, so they're being reviewed by people. If there are any security issues, people would raise them. You could just look at the comments, and they're likely to get fixed because they're open source, and somebody will come in and fix them. Because they're exposed to a very, very large audience, that the chances of somebody hiding some malicious code in there that purposely does damage to your organization is very low, and that goes undetected is very low. Now, but there's going to be unintended consequences that are less obvious. So there are ways that open source could be less secure than what a large organization's QA process can do. So I would say that something that's open source is probably less secure than like the MS Teams client, just because Microsoft pours billions of dollars into security, and open source, even with all the people looking at the code, wouldn't go to the depth that they go to. At the end of the day, for security, just use your own judgment. If something is trying to access sensitive data, then you probably should be a little bit more careful and review the code more clearly. But if somebody, if this open source is just basically grouping all your applications together, or pulling in data from that it's not sensitive, if they're not reading your mailbox or anything, then the security risk is fairly low, right? So how do we enhance the intranet without breaking the bank? So we're talking about the cost benefit analysis and the return on investment. Everybody wants to have high ROI and high return on investment, and we think that open source is one of the best way to do that. So some of the open source sites that most people use are GitHub. GitHub is the biggest one for Microsoft related open source code because Microsoft bought them. So there are a lot of Microsoft MVPs and Microsoft engineers contributing to open source code on GitHub. Things on GitHub are generally, it's kind of an unofficial, official Microsoft source, if you get what I mean. Things on there are generally more secure and they're more well built. There's also other places that are common. There's Google Code. So Google Code is I think the best for Android and mobile apps code. And there's SourceForge, which is one of the original open source, which still has a large community. Then let's go back to the cost-benefit analysis. So we already talked about that your ROI is much higher than building your own custom code. Since open source is a fairly mature practice already, unlike 10 years ago, there's a good chance you're going to find something similar to what you want as an open source, especially when it comes to intranet. Intranet is not a new concept. If you joined our last webinar, you would know that intranet has been around, the concept has been around for about 25 years. In that time, people have thought of most of the needs, and anything that's commonly needed, there's likely an open source for it somewhere. Most of the time, you don't need a complete custom development team. One developer or one IT administrator with some technical knowledge is able to handle making minor customizations and deployment of an open source code. So the difference between using open source and doing your complete custom development is you need one person to do the customization, or you need like a team of developers, architects, and QA to have a complete brand new product built for you. And this is why it's small investment that leads to large productivity gains. At the end of the day, you're getting the same product. I mean, it does what you want it to do, but it's the process of how to get there. The difference between, like if you want to eat a sandwich, the difference between going out there, grow your own wheat, grind your own flour, and bake your own bread, than just go to the supermarket for $1.99, buy a loaf of bread or something. And the other big cost benefit is that the company owns it, so you don't have any dependencies. You're not subject to unexpected cost rises. You're not subject to this tough decision on whether or not you want to just stop using it because it's not working, and the other company won't support you to the level that you want, and you don't have this problem of having to switch vendors and having a very difficult time offboarding the previous solution, trying to onboard a new solution. All of those things together leads to not only financial gains, but a lot less pain on the owners of these applications, or whoever have to manage the applications, most likely the IT department. So with that said, we're going to go on to our demo stage, and I would like to pass that back to Yemi.
Thank you so much, Nan. I just realized, I think when I started the demo, I did not share my screen to say. So what I'm going to say is that this presentation is going to be shared with everyone after the webinar. So actually after today's webinar, so you're rest assured that you would definitely get a copy of it. So everything that I said earlier, you'd get a copy of that. So again, thank you, Nan. Thank you so much for that very detailed presentation. So what we're going to be looking at now is a series of a list of commonly used web parts that we have seen and also implemented across various portals for our clients. There is also a web part. These are also web parts that have been mostly requested for by our clients that are interested in opting out of paying for subscriptions to other vendors, and also wanting a solution that is truly branded for them. So in today's demonstration, we'll briefly go through each highlighted open source web part here, just to give you an idea of its functionalities and insights on how you could further customize and brand it to fit your own organization's requirements. Just to make sure that I'm sharing my screen here. Nan, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great. So the first thing we're going to look at here is the employee directory. You would notice that through this presentation, we've included a link. So at any point, once you receive this, slide, you can always go back to visit those particular open source that I would highlight today. So let's get into it. So this employee directory is always a top ask for us, as it makes it easy to find resources quickly within the organization. So as you can see on this GitHub page that I've opened, once the application has been deployed to your organization's app store and activated on your site collection, you can then quickly add it to any page within your site. This app out of the box allows you to quickly find a user by selecting the beginning letter of their last name. And if you don't find who you're looking for, you can also utilize the search feature to type and find the user's name as well. So in our own case, the common usage scenario actually is having the employee directory as its own page within your portal. And then the link of that page is added to the top portal's navigation for quicker access. In this same scenario, the employee directory app and page is then further customized to have a taxonomy-driven refiner on the page for better filtering on the other fields such as location, department, job titles, etc., which yields a better search results and also gives a better user experience. So hopefully you can kind of envision that. I also be more than happy to have a one-on-one to show you what that could really look like. Because as you can see here, this could be just an app on your page, or you could just have it be a full page that is really tailored towards staff directory or employee directory or any kind of directory as you kind of envision it to be. Okay. The next one here that I would like to highlight is it's a mega menu. As we all know, and let me just scroll up here so we can quickly see that. Okay, so this is modern SharePoint mega menu. So as we all know, SharePoint has recently upgraded to now have a mega menu experience, which a lot of companies prefers to the traditional cascading menu. So although this is quite exciting for companies that want to quickly find information by having a broad view of links to choose from, it still has its visual appeal limitation from a branding perspective. So with that said, some custom app developers like us have decided to take it upon ourselves to build other appealing mega menus. As you can see in this example here, this open source mega menu is responsive and it renders differently on desktop or smaller screen, as you can see here. And also, this mega menu also consists of 3 levels of navigation, just like you have in the SharePoint out-of-the-box mega menu. And additionally, this open source mega menu can always be further customized to have your own branding. I know some people enjoy seeing some icons on the menu itself, etc. So just keep in mind that there's a lot of things like Non had mentioned earlier in this presentation that you can truly do with some of this open source if you want to further customize it to yours. So just imagine the wonderful things that you can really have with these items. So the next thing I would like to showcase here is the toggler. This again is another top ask for our clients. As you can see, this is a site editor toggler. And as you can see this app on this, again, GitHub page, once you've installed it and configured the app on your own organization's app store, you then see that the toggler button is available, this is the toggler button here, is available on all your modern pages, which allows you to show and hide the site editor, as this demonstration is running through right now, by pulling the content to the top and giving more reading space to the user. This is pretty awesome, right? So you can hide some information. Now, we've kind of done it a little bit differently for our clients because we believe it has a greater need than that. So just to kind of demonstrate what we've done within our own environment, if I was to click on our team sites here, you can see that this toggler has been installed in our own environment. Let me move this pane down here. So you can see that this toggler has been installed in our own environment and it's made available for all the sites collection. It's made available for all the pages within this particular site collection. And this is a team sites for those wondering. So all I have to do is just click on this toggler here. You'd see that what we've done is, rather than having the site editor here, being hidden, we noticed that a lot of our clients actually want the ribbon itself here to be hidden so they can truly have their own intranet feel. rather than having to have this blue ribbon across the page or site. So people have the option to hide and to show so they can get that true experience, because obviously we don't want to take away some of the functionalities that SharePoint has to offer. So the ability to hide it and to show it goes a long way. So this demonstration was very quick. At this point, I'm going to pass it on over back to Nan. But again, if you have any questions, we'll definitely take it right after this next demonstration. So Nan, I'll pass it on over back to you.
Thank you, Yami. So now I get to show some of my favorite open source for related to intranet and the modern workplace. So this one is called the alert. So this fits in with the intranet theme of top-down communication. So it's very often the company, as you can see here, the company will want to make an announcement. And they want to have that announcement stand out. How do we do that? How do you make it stand out compared to everything else on the page? This is the solution. You can have an announcement happening right here. This is also customizable. You can have a bigger font. You can have a big red banner across the top, or anything you like. So the idea here is that you can make announcements that everybody can see, and it just pops up right on your intranet homepage or all the pages. So this is very good for top-down communication. The other one I want to show is the newsfeed web part. So SharePoint out of the box has a news web part. However, you have to bring in each news post manually. You would have to link each news post. So this one brings in an entire news feed, and it gets automatically updated when your company publishes news externally. So this is a good way to keep employees aware of what's going on in the company in related to external communication and corporate news. So you wouldn't have to make all of these news posts twice, or you wouldn't have to manually bring them in via the SharePoint out of the box web part. It's a very neat feature that saves time and administration cost while keeping your employees informed. So again, this fits into the top-down communication aspect. The last one I want to show is probably one of my favorite, is the personal apps. So what this thing does is it allows you to create a personalized dashboard for all the applications that you use. So these applications are the ones that will display per user on SharePoint, and you can also consume this on Teams or other media, tablets, smartphones. So this is one of the best things about the new modern workplace, is give people the ability to customize. So I think everybody remembers back in the last webinar, we talked about one of the big goals of the modern intranet is to solve this problem of how are all your employees going to work together? How does your 20-year-olds and your 60-year-olds all work together in the same intranet? And this is one of a good solution. So you can consume it as a side panel app. You can consume it as tiles inside in a SharePoint intranet page. So you can open this in your web browser on your desktop, or you can open this on your Teams client. It would look like this, and you can manage your own favorite applications. So this solves several problems at the same time. Problem number one is the context switching problem. So if you're using all of these applications and you have to go to different windows, different web browsers, that reduces your productivity. So by bringing all your personal apps that you use on a regular basis into the same screen, it gives you it reduces context switching. The next one is that it empowers the users. Users can choose what they put on there. It's not controlled by the IT. The IT doesn't have to set a common dashboard for everybody. It's very difficult to come up with a personal apps dashboard that works for everybody in the company. Okay, because everybody have different roles and they have different preferences. Maybe some people only want to have a few, some people want to have a lot. So that way you empower the users, give them the freedom to choose what to put on their personal app dashboard, and reduce your administrative costs. You don't have all these support tickets and go, oh, I have too many apps on my dashboard, or this app's not relevant for me. Can you get rid of it? And then lastly, it allows people to consume this however they want. So lets everybody work together. If you're the type that wants to sit in front of your desktop, then you can choose to use this version. If you are you like Teams, you like to do things on your phone and mobile, you can choose this version or this version. And you can even choose not to use this at all. So people will have the freedom to be able to install or pin this app on their team rail, or have it in their home page, or they can simply remove it. If they don't want to see it, all they do is unpin the tab on Teams, and it's not there anymore. So you're not forcing anybody to use it. They can use as much or as little as they want, and they're able to customize their experience. So all those things together makes this an ideal fit for the modern workplace, where your goal is to have people be able to work together on a common platform and give people choices that empowers them. With that said, I will turn it back to Yami to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Nan. All right, so I will take over here. Bear with me for just a second. All right, so we do have some questions. Nan, can you verify again that you can see my screen, just to be sure?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so we do have some questions here, and please feel free to keep the questions coming if you feel like some of your questions that you might have has not been answered. The first question that we have here is, for the alerts web parts, can this also show on a mobile app too as well, or is this just for the web option?
Absolutely, it will show on mobile devices as well. And we can even go a step further where it gives you like a push alert or something if you want to customize it like that.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm guessing you mean push notifications by the push alert, right, Nan?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, the next question I have here is, can we find mobile apps on GitHub, or is it just only for desktops only?
There are all kinds of open sources, so for sure you can find mobile apps as open source on GitHub.
Okay, awesome. And how long is the one-on-one consultation? Okay, so I know I can take this one on because I know I'd mentioned that earlier. So one-on-one consultation is typically anywhere between 30 minutes to 1 hour long. And as I've mentioned, this is a free consultation. The goal is to help you get comfortable with your project or what you're trying to implement within your organization. Okay. And the next question I have here is, are there other apps for MS Teams specifically in GitHub?
Yes, there are a lot of applications for MS Teams. Actually, that is one of the things, MS Teams application is what Microsoft is pushing the hardest. So in this last month or two, there has been a huge influx of team applications in open source, not only on GitHub, but GitHub is the main repository, but also on other open source repositories as well.
Okay, awesome, awesome. All right, the next question is, can government entities use these open source apps, and what are the security constraints?
Government entities Again, you would have to consult the laws of your state or country, depends on where you're from. But mostly these open source applications do not violate any data compliance policies. Your data is still stored where they are still stored, and so the data at rest and in transit does not change, and it follows all of Microsoft's security standards. So as long as you're able to install, have the tenant in your geographical location or as a government agency, you should be fine. Security audits are obviously going to be more intense for government organizations, which is why reviewing the code is even more important. Most of these web or these apps, all they do is surface data onto the front end. They do not have any effect on in terms of data security.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's see. The other question we have here is, are these SharePoint Online apps only, or can they be applied to SharePoint server? I'm guessing they mean on SharePoint on-prem.
Yes. So for SharePoint on-premise, depending on the version of the SharePoint on-premise, uses a different framework. So if you're talking about SharePoint 2016, they can only use the oldest SharePoint framework. Not all the rich functionalities and the responsive design will work in SharePoint 2016. For SharePoint 2019, you have a lot more options and newer framework. However, all these code will need to be modified to be able to deploy on SharePoint server. Although all the open source we've shown today targets SharePoint Online framework, we would have to be able to use them for a SharePoint on-premise server. You would need to rebuild all the code using the appropriate framework that targets the version of SharePoint that you have installed.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I think before we go into the next series of questions, we do have Juan Larios on the line, and Juan is our guest speaker. So I would let him just go ahead to give us some feedback in regards to what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Juan.
can you hear me okay? Hi there.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that there are a couple of things that you should be mindful of if you have a development group internally or people that are going to be managing some of these extensions and web parts and things that we've showcased. If you are interested, there are a bunch of community calls that Microsoft has that are open to everybody. They are led and attended to and contributed to by MVPs or just people in the community. I contribute some things in there. I'm sure Nan can contribute to the overall products and mini solutions that are posted and free from Microsoft. And what's interesting about those is they also showcase new features, new things that are coming out. And it'd be really interesting if you are interested in kind of keeping up with what's coming out and what's new to join those community calls. I'm sure we could add that to resources in our PowerPoint so you can become aware of those. The reason I mention that is because there's a new starter kit that's being worked on right now. I believe it might actually be out, but maybe not as advertised right now. It's a new starter kit with a bunch of new web parts. Some of them have been reworked, some of them have been updated, and using more of the latest and greatest features.
Right.
So that's the only reason why I kind of wanted to mention that, because there's some new starter kit and the community is contributing quite a bit all the time. So it's difficult to keep up, but there are lots of other resources where you can keep up with what the community is putting out there as free, open source.
Yeah, and just to kind of point that out, Microsoft does own GitHub. I think Nan already mentioned this. And so just looking at that starter kit, I believe it's on GitHub. It gives you a lot of apps, just like Juan just mentioned. So it would definitely be a good start. if you're looking to explore some open source web parts. So we'll definitely add that to the slide here for those interested in going to check those out as well before we send it out to everyone. Okay, the other questions we have here is what are the other places we can get open source applications besides GitHub? I'll let Nan take that.
The ones we mentioned and the largest ones are Google Code. So that one has a lot of content, and Google contributes a lot of their Android. So there was a question about mobile. So a lot of Android mobile apps, open source code are on that platform. The other one is SourceForge, which is one of the oldest, and it still has a large community.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I think at this point, we just want to give our final thoughts. If we haven't answered any of your questions during the course of this webinars series, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn user handle is Oluwayemisi Bakri. My email is yemi@apecgroup.com. Reach out to me if you have any questions, any consultations that we can offer. We're more than happy to take it from there. Also, feel free to reach out to us via our website as well. And I'll turn it over back to Nan. Nan, do you have any departing words as we come to the end of our webinar for today?
Yeah. So I would urge everybody to consider this open source option. I know in the past this has been a bit of debated topic, whether or not you should use open source or you should just hire your own development team or just hire a vendor. But again, technology is getting more mature. As the open source community grows, the capabilities of open source code is rivaling some of the most highly paid professional code. So as we have all this extra resources, I think everybody should explore at least the possibility of using it. So open source, just because it's free, it's not one of those cases just because it's free, it's terrible. It's just a preview. It doesn't actually do anything. It's child's play. That's all true like 10 years ago, where people didn't have that much time and resources and no incentives really to create powerful and enterprise level open source products. But all those incentives are there here today. As we've mentioned in this webinar, a lot of the companies such as Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, Google, they're all supporting the open source community. And therefore, the product that comes out of open source community is getting higher and higher in quality. And using them today should be a serious contender when you're making your decision in building any customizations related to your IT infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Nan. And I think I would also just add a little to that. One of the things I would say, maybe this could be like a homework for everyone, is to, if you already have an intranet solution that you're using within your organization, you can just, go to it and assess it. And you start to find that some of the things that maybe you've procured from third-party organizations, or some of the things that maybe you've deployed within your organization using your internal IT departments, are some of the exact same things that you would see on the open source platforms that we've mentioned today. You can start to look at the similarities and see that, Microsoft have given developers like us to find this open source, build it out, further build it out, and resell it. So that's where, other vendors, can make more money by taking some of this and repurposing it and packaging it and selling it to other organizations. So if it's something that, you can, take that minute out to kind of assess what you have in-house currently and see what's out there, you can start to see the similarities of how companies like ours are also taking advantage of it. So what we're saying here today is, start to, feel free with open sources and take a look at it and see what's out there. Look at the starter kits. Look at what Microsoft has put out there for developers like ours that are looking to offer all this out of all these open source extensions for other developers or for other organizations that are looking to cut costs, that are looking to truly have solutions that are branded to themselves rather than having to pay subscriptions for something that they can, spend the development time or bringing in, organizations like us to help you build something that's for you and cut costs in the long term as far as subscriptions and long-term payments are concerned. So just something to think about, something to to have an insight of how you can find these tools and repurpose it to fit your own business needs. So, all right, I think we've said a lot. Again, thank you so much for taking the time out to meet with us today. Our last series is going to be this coming Thursday at May 28th at 12 p.m. EST. And we're going to be talking about Intranet in a Box. You do not want to miss it. So I look forward to having everyone on. And again, we will be sharing the slide presentation as well as the recording of this webinar today. And feel free to respond to the email sent out if you have any questions. Thank you so much again for your time, and have a good, lovely rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.